vehicle assembly building here. This happens to be one of the largest buildings in the world. I know it's hard to tell that. However, you can see that there's an American flag on the side of that building. That American flag up there is 21 stories tall. Yeah. Each one of the stars on that flag are 6 feet from point to point. And the stripes on that flag, they are so wide that if I could drive this bus up and down any one of those stripes. Now, if you've ever been to a basketball game, the blue section alone is the size of an NBA basketball court. Now, this is the building that we use to put together the Apollo rockets, the space shuttles, and now our new space launch system before we take them out to the launch pad. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to the gray stripes on the side of the vehicle assembly building that are facing the road out in front of us here. Those are the tallest doors in the world. 456 feet tall. Takes 45 minutes to open the door. And just to give you an idea how big those doors are, we can easily slide the Statue of Liberty on her base through one of those doors and still have 150 feet to clear the top of the doors. Now, in a few minutes, you folks are going to go see a Saturn V rocket. When the Saturn V rocket was coming out of one of those doors going out to the launch pad, it only had 6 feet to clear the top of those doors. Our new space launch system is going to be even bigger than that. Now, this building is so big, we could put the old Yankee Stadium on the roof of this building and still have an acre left over for parking. It is so cavernous inside that if we could disassemble the Empire State Building, we could get 3.5 Empire State Buildings inside there. It is the tallest one-story building in the world, and the 6th largest one-story building by volume. Now, I have another giant thing I'd like to point out for you folks. We have a giant vehicle here about the size of a building with some rusty looking tank-like tracks on it over here on the right-hand side. That's called the Crawler Transporter. That's the giant vehicle that we use to move around the Apollo rockets and the space shuttles here on the property.
When I was a kid, I used to dream about flying through space. Every week on TV, I'd watch my heroes as they jumped into their rocket ships and took to the stars. And I wanted to be like them. They had courage, imagination, and no problem ever stood in their way for long. You know, in the end, when we actually did send men into space, it turned out that those were exactly the qualities it took.
I'm John Hudson. This is Pad 39 of the Kennedy Space Center. I was a launch controller here when from this very spot, man took off to fly to the moon. It was a journey that began 12 years before that rocket ever left the ground. And it started on the other side of the world.
Back then, we were one of 2 superpowers that always seemed to be on the edge of a terrible war. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first ever man-made satellite into Earth orbit. They called it Sputnik, which means traveling companion. In a world where peace hung in a delicate balance, it seemed to create a dangerous advantage. Every ham radio operator in America could hear it beeping. People were afraid. Were the Soviets looking down on us? Watching us? If they could make a satellite pass over our cities, could they do the same with a bomb? Our own space program kicked into high gear, and less than 2 months later, we were ready to launch our own satellite. It was being called the space race, and we were running a distant second. In 1961, we fell even further behind. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man into space, circling the world in just 89 minutes. We had our own astronauts, and they were eager and ready to take the big ride. But our manned space program couldn't seem to get off the ground. We stuck with it, and on May 5th, 1961, things finally started going right. Astronaut Alan Shepard took his ship Freedom 7 6.5 miles into space. America had its first space hero. Just a few days later, our space program received a new challenge. But this one did not come from the Soviet Union. It came from our young president. In one inspiring moment, he changed the mission from one based in fear of the present to one of hope for the future.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
We hadn't been more than 16 minutes into space, and now we were going to the moon. We would have to design a rocket the size of a 36-story office building, put it together with the precision of a microscope, and accelerate it to the speed of a bullet. Then we would have to guide it to a moving target 250,000 miles away. Many people thought it was an impossible dream, but 400,000 of us set about making that dream a reality. It would be the longest, most hazardous voyage that any man had dared to attempt. But step by step, mission by mission, we orbited the Earth, perfecting the skills and technologies we would need on this incredible journey. Our astronauts practiced maneuvering, docking, and the 1,000 other tasks that would comprise the moon mission. We created new alloys, lighter and stronger than anything seen before. We designed communication systems that would be reliable over the vast distance. And behind it all, we tried to perfect the rocket that would be powerful enough to punch out of Earth orbit and take us to the moon. One day, however, the dream of flying to the moon almost slipped away. It was January 27th, 1967. Astronauts Virgil Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee were on board Apollo 1 for a plugs-out test, a full-scale dress rehearsal for the actual launch. Suddenly it happened. There was a fire in the capsule. 3 men whose lives had been in our hands were lost.
Surely the opening vistas of space promise high costs and hardships, as well as high reward. But this country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them.
After Apollo 1, some thought we'd failed, and that the moon was out of our reach. But we owed it to those men to learn from their sacrifice and to carry on. We started taking the Apollo vehicle apart, piece by piece. Was the design flawed? Had safety been compromised? Tough questions. And we spent 1.5 years redesigning the spacecraft so that no astronaut's life would ever be at risk because we overlooked something, or because we could have done something better. A moon rocket is 91% high explosive, and it goes into the most unforgiving, hazardous environment there is. We could never make it risk-free, and the men who flew them knew that. We didn't send men into space again until Apollo 7 orbited the Earth, testing some of the new designs. When everything worked perfectly, the decision was made. The next mission would travel to the moon. It was mankind's destiny to leave the shores of our planet behind and strike out across the vast ocean of space. In the great span of our history, now was the time that we could. Now was the time that we would. We stood on the eve of the longest, most dangerous journey that any man had ever undertaken. And it would be taken by Frank Borman, James Lovell, and William Anders, the crew of Apollo 8. Through those doors, you'll find the firing room, launch control, just as it was on December 21st, 1968.
This is the firing room, launch control for the Apollo missions. This is not a mock-up. These are the very consoles we sat at when men first took off to fly to the moon. The tragedy of Apollo 1 had put us a year and a half behind. We were making up for it in one big leap, and we were doing it with a rocket that no man had ever flown before.
It was a few days before Christmas 1968 when Apollo 8 sat on the pad. She was the first of a new kind, a moon rocket. This was the Phoenix, risen from the ashes of Apollo 1. The first Apollo crew did not die in vain. This was to be their testament. "36 stories high, she had been fully fueled throughout the night. The liquid oxygen in her tanks caused ice to form on the outside of the craft. The extreme temperature differences between the air and the sub-zero fuel caused the metal skin of the rocket to expand and contract. Everyone who was on the pad agreed. It was as though the rocket was alive, breathing, straining at the leash. Earlier in the morning, astronauts Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders had made their final preparations before taking that long ride out to the waiting spacecraft. The minimum safe distance from a Saturn V at liftoff was 3 miles. The reason was simple. When fully fueled, the rocket contained the explosive power of an atomic bomb. As the clock counted down, the astronauts and all of us in launch control went through the pre-flight checks, our hands on the controls of the most powerful, most complex machine ever built. It had over 2 million separate systems, and to bring these men back alive, everything had to work perfectly. Each individual system had been tested, but what we didn't know was how they would perform when all 2 million began to work together. That moment would come when the countdown clock reached 0. If a maneuvering thruster failed, if communications broke down, if navigation was off by 1 degree, if any piece of the miles of wiring, circuits, relays, or valves was defective, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders would pay with their lives. As they sat, waiting for launch on that chill December morning, these 3 astronauts were back to what they had always been, test pilots. You are now in the final minutes before the launch of Apollo 8, right here where it actually happened. Mankind is about to leave his planet behind and journey to another. It is one of those rare moments when history is not being made, destiny is being embraced.
communications checks with the Apollo 8 astronauts in the cabin, and communications are go. During this period, once we do get the firing command, the various tanks within the 3 stages of the Saturn V launch vehicle begin to pressurize. Do we have firing command? The firing command is in. We're now on the automatic sequence, 2 minus 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Our status board indicates that all aspects are ready. Instrument unit is ready, spacecraft ready, final check of the emergency detection system, that ready like also. First stage preparations are completed.
All systems are okay. Keep going. We're on. Ready to go to Cronkite. Stand by, water. Okay, you're on.
All systems go.
T-minus 45 seconds and counting. First stage, the oxygen tank has been pressurized, and the pressure is still building up. Coming up on 90 seconds mark, T-minus 90 seconds and counting. The Apollo 8 crew standing by, spacecraft commander Frank Warren, Jim Lovell, Bill Anders. We now report that the liquid hydrogen tank on the 3rd stage is pressurized, 1 minute 15 seconds. All 3rd stage propellants pressurized at this time as we come up on the 60-second mark on the flight to the moon. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. The vehicle now is completely pressurized. We're coming up on power transfer shortly. We have the power transfer. We're now on the flight batteries within the launch vehicle. Final reports coming from Frank Borman at this time. Now look at the switch list of the spacecraft. 20 seconds on our steps. We are still low at this time. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4.
Apollo 8 successfully orbited the moon, and the astronauts returned safely to the Earth. I know. I'm Jim Lovell, and I was one of the crew of this spacecraft, Apollo 8. We were the first men to see the surface of the moon from just a few miles away. But it was the hundreds of thousands of men and women who worked in that team, and the millions of people who supported the mission that really made it possible. That way, I guess, we all went to the moon. Now, on the other side of those doors, you'll find an actual Saturn V moon rocket. It's still the most powerful, the most complex machine ever built. And I guess it's the only one that can take you to another planet. I actually got to fly one on a second flight to the moon called Apollo 13. But that's another story.
Less 30 seconds. Roll complete and the pitch is programmed. One Bravo.
Altitude, velocity, light. 8.5 down, 220 feet. 15 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely, 200 feet. 4.5 down, 5.5 down. Within 60 feet, 6.5 down, 5.5 down. 9 forward. Good. In 20 feet. 100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. How many bites? 75 feet. Guys looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet, down 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Down a half. 30 seconds. Forward, just. Ready? Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Great. We're standing by for Eagle. Okay, he's coming on. We copy out. Flight controllers, we're off to a good start. Play it cool. AOS Lemon. Roger, AOS Lemon. Houston Eagle, how do you read? Bye-bye, Eagle. We're standing by for your burn report, over. Roger, the burn was on time.
As soon as the Eagle reappears, things begin to go wrong.
Flight controllers, we've lost data. We lost all data with Eagle.
Radio communications break down.
Eagle, Houston, can you call?
Messages to Eagle must be relayed through Mike Collins aboard the command module Columbia.
Eagle, any copy, Columbia?
Throughout the crucial final checks, contact with the Eagle keeps dropping out.
Don't lose that data.
And Flight Director Gene Kranz inches closer to aborting the mission.
Columbia, Houston, we lost Eagle again. High over. Okay, we got data back. Radar flight looks good.
With the vital computer links temporarily holding, the moment of decision is now.
Okay, all flight controllers, Donut go for landing. Retro, go. Right go. Guys, go. Roll, go. Telcom, go. ESP, go. Econ, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, we're go for landing. Eagle, Houston, you're go for landing, over. Roger, understand, go for landing. 1, 0. Good.
Hurtling toward the moon at 3,800 miles per hour, Neil Armstrong notices his checkpoints are all appearing too soon. This means a serious navigation error.
Thanks, you're a little long downrange.
At these speeds, 3 seconds long means missing the safe landing zone by 3 miles. Suddenly, the computer starts firing the maneuvering thrusters, jolting the ship back and forth. This has happened in simulations, but never this much, never this violent. The smooth descent is becoming a bumpy ride. Before that is fixed,
Program alarm.
a problem with the onboard computer.
The 1202, 1202 alarm.
The astronauts have rehearsed for thousands of possible malfunctions, but not this one. It had been considered too unlikely. Seconds seem like hours as everyone struggles to remember the meaning of a 1202 program alarm. The deadline to safely aboard is vanishing fast.
So that the reading on the 1202 program alarm.
1202 means the Eagle's onboard computer is overloading. This means Houston is blind, unable to make navigation corrections or interpret the data coming from Eagle's computer. Armstrong and Aldrin are on their own. Mission Control decides they can go ahead
We're going that flight. We're going that alarm.
if the data link doesn't fail again.
We're going that alarm.
1,000 feet, and Neil Armstrong can see that the computer is proposing to put them down in a dangerous place. That landing site is full of boulders. If they land there, they will never take off again.
Okay, we're going.
At 350 feet, Armstrong ignores his computer navigation and veers away from the rocky landing site with no time to explain to Mission Control.
Okay, all flight controllers, take time.
In Mission Control, everybody is stunned. At 300 feet, the Eagle has left its flight plan and taken off at full speed across the face of the moon.
Eagle, Houston, it's descent to fuel. The monitor, over.
90 seconds of fuel remaining. Now less than 200 feet, and the Eagle is too low to safely abort back into orbit. They call this part of the flight plan Dead Man's Curve.
No level, no level.
All that's left for Mission Control is to read off the fuel remaining in seconds.
60 seconds. 60 seconds.
The entire moon landing has come down to 2 men and 1 minute.
Forward. Forward. 20 feet down, 2.5. And pass 30. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Lights on. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Big shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward, just into the right level. Down a half. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
A short time later, history is made again.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
For one incredible moment, we are one people with one history, watching our destiny unfold.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Armstrong is on the moon, delivering 38-year-old America.
It was a moment shared by an entire world.
Dear man from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon. It came indeed for all mankind.
With these first steps, mankind stood on the highest ground, and we saw our planet as our home port in the endless ocean of space.
There was something which was surprising to me. That occurred as I was standing on the surface. Just after we had landed, I'd gone down, standing on the surface and looking at planet Earth for the first time, seeing the beauty, seeing the finiteness of it, the limits of it, realizing what a shame it was that people were confronting each other on that planet without realizing what it was doing to the planet. It was a very emotional moment for me. I actually shed a couple of tears. Something totally unexpected for an engineer, fighter pilot to be crying quietly up there on the moon.
Mankind had achieved a tenuous foothold in the heavens, and a new and exciting world lay waiting to be explored. The first mission had stayed for only one day, but over the next 3.5 years, 5 more Apollo missions visited the moon, and with each one, we stayed longer, roamed further, and discovered more.
I never thought when I was a kid building rockets, in high school, that we would go to the moon, before the end of the century. I mean, I thought that was something that was way in the future, fantasy.
I was rolling on the moon one day in a very early month of December. May. Look at the size of that rock. That is the best sample we got. Just don't stub your toe.
We've got to understand that as a people, we need to stretch. We need to reach beyond our grasp. We need to strive to do things that seem impossible, because in the accomplishment of them, we move society forward.
Boy, isn't the beauty of this place is just absolutely incredible.
One of the astronauts has said those hills that we climbed give our children and grandchildren a different perspective, that they see the mountains that we couldn't see. And so what we consider impossible, they're dreaming about.
3, 2, 1. What a ride, what a ride.
When I have a chance to talk to kids, I tell them, the first thing I tell them is to take the word impossible out of their vocabulary. Go to their teacher tomorrow morning and scratch it out of the dictionary. The word doesn't exist. If I could stand here and tell you that I lived on the moon, that I called the moon my home for 3 days, you tell me what is impossible in this day and age, much less in a generation that follows, much less into the 21st century. Nothing is impossible.
I like exploring things, inventing. I would like to go up there, find out what's really up there.
I would like to be an astronaut. I like to design rockets.
Payload specialist.
I'd be a ground control officer.
The thing that my mom can't understand is I'm terrified of heights, but I want to be an astronaut.
There's so many things I'd love to do. I would explore, I'd look for everything. I would try to start a farm, millions of other galaxies that you might be able to live in.
It's the unknown. Anything's possible.
You may be able to cure certain diseases. On Mars and dance on it.
Play basketball, but you can still be short, because then you could like fly up in the air.
Baseball would be awesome. Hit the ball, you get a home run every time.
There are a lot of things that could benefit mankind that because of science we simply cannot do on Earth.
It's such a big universe, and it's kind of strange to think that just this one tiny planet was chosen to have life on.
I hear they're finding new planets or moons, and they're finding out more about how stars are working, and it makes me feel like it's trying to tell me something.
What's it trying to tell you?
That you belong up there with them.
The Apollo program ended in December of 1972, but our journey into space is just beginning. I'm Neil Armstrong. The future of space travel is being written right now in the dreams and imaginations of a new generation. Perhaps that's the greatest legacy of Apollo. It shows our children and grandchildren that courage, imagination, and will to explore, no dream is impossible.